What's up, fellas? Good to see everybody back for a special episode of the Blind Pig, courtesy of BGObsession.com. Real quick, we'll do intros, and then if anybody is wondering why we're having this podcast tonight, you probably don't have any interest in the podcast. Top left is Bob. You can find him as Neophyte. Bottom left is Paul. He hails as Canadian Hog. Bottom right is John. You can find him as Boone, and I am Derek. I hail as Silent Threat. All of those names are us on the board, so please feel free to come by bgobsession.com, mix it up, talk it up, join. Great content. We love to talk. Things are going to get ready to start ramping up. So the reason we are gathered here today is we are T-minus this time tomorrow. Dan Snyder will no longer own the Washington Commander skins. Dan Snyder's ownership will be over. Josh Harrison's crew will have taken ownership at this point, and we can all imagine. At first I'll open the floor up and get some reaction as my kids decide to photobomb the podcast here. But if you guys want to just react, and then we'll get into a couple talking points.
I mean, to me, it's surreal, right? I mean, I think it's been such a long, tedious process, and I think Bob called it 6 months ago when we were hoping to be done in like February or something crazy like that, March, before the draft. So I think it's a little bit muted response just because we've been waiting, and of course, even with 2 weeks ago, we were getting like, the stories came out about the email scandal, and we started getting threatening, little missives from Snyder's attorneys about the deal's not done yet, kind of stuff. So I think we were all holding our breath that like the little troll was going to be gone and not pull some kind of fast maneuver at the end. But it looks like it's going through, and I just think it's a little bit surreal because if you would have asked any of us 2 years ago where this was on the possibility scale, it would have been down around like 2% possibility, right? And we certainly hoped it could happen, but I don't think any of us really thought it was going to happen. So it's a pretty amazing thing to have watched occur. And I've said this before, but I think the fan base had a lot to do with it happening. I'm going to push that narrative a little bit because I think the money has always been an issue, but I think if it were just the money, Snyder would have found a way to hold on because he stood to make a lot more as the owner than he does, even making $6 billion. It's only going to go up in value over time. But I think the fan base finally getting fed up and all of the stuff that followed with that, with Congress and the women, just tenaciously going after Snyder with no mercy. And even Tanya Snyder, I think that finally just was too much for him. And whether he saw that it was too much or his wife said, honey, I've had enough of this. I don't know which it was, but it's just an amazing night. And I can't wait till the ink is dry tomorrow.
It honestly feels.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Paul.
No, I was just to add to that. It honestly feels like for me, if I were to give a simple analogy, I feel like a kid on Christmas Eve. We've been such a downtrodden franchise for so long now. We've been, beaten in the head repeatedly. It's been very, very unpleasant. And quite frankly, it's been miserable being a Washington Redskins fan, Commanders, for the past 20 plus years. There's obviously a sense of hope moving forward. I'm trying to temper that enthusiasm because, not very simply because we're changing owners does not necessarily mean that it's going to be an instant fix, but there is a chance that there is going to be a possibility of success at this point. Whereas with Daniel Snyder, you felt like no matter what we were doing, we were simply handcuffed. And because he was at the top of that hierarchy, there was never going to be any chance of real, tangible winning on the football field being done. So, I want to be optimistic, and I certainly am optimistic, but at the same time, I want to try to temper that enthusiasm. But let's face it, at the end of the day, anything is better than that loser that we've dealt with for the past almost 30 years.
Agreed.
Agree completely.
I-
And I think to piggyback on your point, John, I think a major turning point, and we've talked about it on the podcast before, was Tanya Snyder literally getting booed. So whether that was the final linchpin that, ended it, or where it happened, whatever happened, you kind of feel for Tanya that she had to go through that a little bit, but at the same time, when she's married to the guy, so he doesn't exactly have a lot of friends left in the city, not only this city but apparently the country, because he's found himself now exiled to London. But
And she inserted herself in there as his kind of PR protector as the co-CEO. I mean, I would never say anything negative about Tanya Snyder just because of who she decided to marry, but she made the choice to allow herself to be pulled in the leadership structure in what was just a ballsy attempt to shift attention away from her husband and have kind of be able to serve as a sycophant for whatever he would have been doing if he was there. So I think she, I don't have a lot of sympathy for her, just in terms of, I think she asked for it and she got it, ultimately.
You started in that direction, John, and I kind of got to echo something you said. 1 year ago today, I thought Dan Snyder's tenure, or the Snyder family's tenure as the owner of my football team, was going to outlive me. And it was a question of whether or not my fandom would survive. Actually, that wasn't the question. The question was how long my fandom would survive, not if it would survive. It was kind of a foregone conclusion that my fandom was dying, if you really want to know the truth. And it was all around the fact that not only did I not have a product on the field I could be proud of, that was entertaining, that was interesting to watch, that I was willing to argue with people at the bar. For those of you that don't know, I live in Dallas, right? I am a local boy because I was born and raised in Virginia. But I currently reside just outside of Dallas. So the heart of enemy territory, if you will, behind enemy lines, as we say on the boards. And going to bars in a Redskin jersey, Commander's jersey, football team jersey, whichever jersey I pick up, I pull on that particular day, is tough sometimes, right? And I'd kind of reached the point where it wasn't fun anymore. It's not fun to talk football down here. It's not fun to be a football fan down here, because of who I root for. And I can't root for anybody else. It's not like I'm going to change teams. I'm either rooting for Washington or I am not paying attention. Not going to bag on anybody for deciding that they want to root for a different team. If you're a fan of the game and you want to do that, that's great. But I couldn't do that. And so a year ago today, if you'd asked me, it was a question of how long I could stomach watching an organization that wasn't just a football embarrassment, but a social and political embarrassment.
Yeah.
A punchline. And I'm not interested. Wasn't interested.
And think how many fans didn't make it to the day a year ago when you were talking, when you were feeling all those things. How many fans have fallen by the wayside that just said, to hell with this guy and what he's doing, and just the constant promises and just, failure on recycle. I was looking through some blogs I wrote, because we've been going since 2009 on BGO. I was looking back on some blogs after Gibbs left, kind of talking about, what's going to happen now. And then after the Shanahan's left, another blog, what's going to happen now? And just the blog titles were dismally negative, hopeless.
At least you kept writing. I couldn't even write anymore. It was so bad I couldn't even write anymore.
Yeah, it's not been easy, man. It has not been easy. And I think, one thing that the new group, I know we're getting ready to talk about, like, what do we want from the new group, but I think one thing they need to do is they need to say, thank you, fans, man. Those of you that are still out there, thank you for hanging in there. the new sheriff's in town, and it's going to be different going forward. But anyone who's still a fan of this franchise deserves a medal. There's no doubt about that.
And just to piggyback off what you were alluding to a bit earlier, Bob, how nice and refreshing will it be at this point? Forget the wins and losses. How nice will it be, very simply, to be able to follow a football organization? And when we talk about the team, we're simply talking about football. It's been a nonstop, drama-filled soap opera. Like I feel like all the time that I invested on our board or anywhere else, reading or talking about the team, you're never talking about what it is that actually drew us in, which is the game itself, the game that we all love as fans, right? And I mean, hey, if we go, 5-12, sorry, maybe I should say 5-12, not 5-11, 5-12, yeah. Even if we went 5-12 and we're strictly a football organization at this point, I will take that. I'll take that as a win, and I'll take that as a step in the right direction.
It's crazy that all that dysfunction has just become the norm for us, right? Like we don't even think twice about half the threads on a Washington football board are like negative about the owner, or what horrible things have gone on. It's kind of crazy. That's what it's like to be a Washington fan. And I have Jets friends, or they're really the only ones that I can talk any smack to. But I also have some Dallas and Philly fan friends. And I mean, I got nothing. What can I say? Well, I can't even defend myself. They just start razzing on Washington. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right. I have a lot of, as you can imagine, I have a lot of friends who are Cowboy fans. We've reached a point down here where they actually feel sorry for me. I mean, they don't even want to rag on me anymore because A, it's too easy. And B, I mean, they get excited when the team wins a football game because they know what it means to me. And I had some friends, was it last year or 2 years ago? I don't know. The last time we just positively thumped the Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day, my wife hated the fact the Cowboys, they were like, yeah, Bob's got something to be excited about. He's not making the playoffs. He's getting a high draft pick, but they're going to screw that up. I mean, they won a game. This is awesome. It's like it's a tough world right now to be us. Well, for another 12 to 20 hours.
So in the next 48 hours, we're going to hear the first public statements, at least public statements about the actual franchise. And the press is going to be peppering Josh Harris, Mitchell Rales, Magic Johnson, with questions about what's the plan. So I know we wanted to spend a little bit of time just talking about, like, in terms of the team itself, what are we what do we want to hear from the new owners, or what do we think their top priorities should be coming right out of the gate?
So what I would like to see, and I think it's fairly obvious, and if you look at Josh Harris's previous history in other sports, there is a path towards him following this tendency. But ideally for me, find me and commit to the general manager who's going to then find me the coach who's going to lead this team for the next 10 to 15 years. I'm tired of the constant change. I'm tired of the, constant shifting in directions. Find me a professional who's going to be able to lead this organization, and find me someone who is going to fully be capable of handling the football operation and turning us into a professional looking organization. And I feel we've lacked that professionalism for a very, very long time. And I think that is a very key step in the process of our rebirth, so to speak.
You have to wonder, especially given the protracted period between finding out that Snyder was probably selling and tomorrow, that lengthy time period, you have to wonder whether maybe they already have somebody in the wings. And so I'd like to hear what you guys think about that. But I really hope that they do. And the reason for that is we have a lot of assessment that has to be done there. It's too late for them to can the head coach and can Jason Wright and can, the Martys, et cetera. Even if they wanted to do that, ultimately, it's too late to do that. We got to dance with the date we brung in 2023, just because of the timing of it. But I really hope they have somebody in the wings ready to go, so that guy can come in who's not named Ron Rivera. So that guy can come in and start that assessment process. What do you guys think? Is that a possibility?
I hope like hell that they've already got somebody tapped and they said, as soon as you're a consultant, we're bringing you in. You're now the Josh Harris consultant. You're going to walk in there. You're going to be my eyes and my ears. You're going to be in the meeting rooms. You're going to be, and it be a football mind. You know what I mean? It could be somebody. I mean, obviously, this is somebody who might be on the outside of the game right now, but somebody who could sit down in a meeting room and say, yeah, this is the right way to do things, or this is never going to work. And it could be somebody that they plan to make the GM later, but somebody who can be an objective view of how the business is being run to say, these things need to be addressed. These need to be addressed quickly. And I hope, like hell, Paul, you exactly what you said. I want a GM, and then I want the GM to pick their coach, and then I want the two of them to figure out the plan of quarterback. I don't like. Obviously, I want Sam Howell to be the guy, but I don't want Ron Rivera to be the one that decides that he's going to be the guy going forward. You know what I mean? I want somebody else doing that.
And I guess in making the comment that I made, it's almost under the assumption that I'm taking this coming season as being almost like a washout season. Let it play out, because as John alluded to, the timing of the whole thing, let the thing play out and have a plan in place to be proceeding forward with a proper plan of action for, I guess, the 2024 season, right? I think that's essentially when this whole operation legitimately begins and legitimately starts to be getting critiqued and judged.
Yeah, because of the timing of all this and where we are, I mean, we're right here on the eve of training camp, right? You can't make football changes this not serious football changes. Obviously Rivera, teach the coach last year during training camp, but intriguing because it happens so rarely in camp, right? Even assistant coaches, it doesn't. He's got to bring in a consultant. I would like the consultant to not just pay attention to what's going on our field, but I would like consultant to pay attention to what's going on with our scouts. We've done a great previous regimes. I'd like to see that continue, but I think we can do even better. And that's someplace I feel like a guy that may be the GM ultimately can take a stronger hand immediately and start working with our college scouting teams for this season, so that he's bringing a female GM. That'd be intriguing. But work with the college scouting this year so that they're in a better position to draft next year. But I don't see a lot of changes on the field. I see Josh Harris coming out and making a statement of support for Ron Rivera, because you kind of have to at this point in time. We believe in the coach. We believe in what he's doing. We believe in the hires he's made. We believe in these players. That's all the, I don't know. It's almost boilerplate that writes itself at this point, right? Because we're right here at the beginning of the season, and they're not going to make massive changes to the football operation. I think the big things that they're going to come out and talk about are potential investment in this current stadium. I think if they're smart, they already have a plan to try and make as much adjustment to FedEx as they can between now and opening day. I would be, if it were me, I would be trying to resolve, even though just show an effort at this point in time. I think the fans will be appreciative of that fact. And the other thing I do if I'm Josh Snyder is I don't mention Dan
Josh
Harris
Snyder.
or Dan Snyder. I just don't talk about him for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they will. I think we should all take a vow that we're never going to talk about him again, but we've talked about him enough over the last 20 years. I did want to mention, I'm just going to rattle these off, guys, because I think it kind of argues a little bit against them standing pat in 2023. Not that they're going to make changes. I agree with you guys. There's no way they can make any major changes other than possibly bringing in the next GM candidate or a team that's going to make assessments. But we have 17 free agents, at least as of the last time I checked. And I'm just going to rattle off who they are because it gives you an idea of like some of the decisions we're going to have to make. Curtis Samuel, Jacoby Brissett, who we just signed as a free agent in 2024. 5 defensive ends, Sweat, Young, Toohill, Obata, and Smith Williams are free agents. Kendall Fuller's a free agent. Curl and Reeves, Jeremy Reeves are free agents. Antonio Gibson's a free agent. On the O-line, Sadiq Charles, Tyler Larson, and Cornelius Lucas are all free agents. Cody Barton, who we just signed, is a free agent next year. And Kalike Hudson and Joey Sly. We got to make a decision about him. So I just throw that out there because that that's a lot of what do we do here and what do we do there. And Chase Young alone is going to be a big decision, right? Assuming that he's still on the roster at the start of the season. So they're gonna have to make some decisions. I know in the long haul, it's kind of like, well, yeah, but that'll all sort itself out and whatever happens, and then we can get going full gear in 2024. But I do think they're going to want to have a pretty big role in deciding what happens that's a third of our roster right there.
Mm-hmm. With major contributors. KJ Henry is the only defensive end that we have under contract beyond this year. And he's a rookie who hasn't taken a single snap.
Mm-hmm.
So, but to your point, John, I think you can kind of have it both ways. And I'm just talking when I said, I think we all agree that we say it's too close to training camp. I just think that means you don't make a move before the season starts. But that's not to say that Josh Harrison company don't make a move during the season. We could be 6, 7, 8 weeks into the season and they say, you know what, Ron, you're out. Bieniemy, you're staying with the offense. Del Rio, you're the interim head coach. Or hell, Bieniemy, you're the interim head coach. I would assume Del Rio would get the nod before Bieniemy just because of the history. And they go from there because not much is going to change. But not that I'm, I don't know. I don't know that I'm going to say I'm not rooting for Rivera's head, but that would mean we've pretty much gone off the rails for this season in order for something like that to happen. But it's true. We're going to need that decision maker in here before week 1. And whether that means that you name a new GM before week 1, or you just get them in the building at some other role, evaluating, because there's going to be a lot of decisions that need to be made, which is a massive part of that is the direction of this franchise. With as many first-round picks as we've used on the defensive line, you've got the two big boys in the interior under contract. But you cannot end 2023 going into the offseason with KJ Henry being the only guy you have under contract in that position. It's dangerous. The rest of them you can make do. I'd hate to see, I'd love to see Gibby, but you've got Leonard Fournette walking the streets right now, Dalvin Cook. Barkley hasn't signed his tender. They're talking about missing time. Jacobs did sign his free agent.
He drafted a running back.
Right. So the market for running backs is diminishing, and so it's interesting. Is Gibson going to do enough that they even want to bring him back? Who knows?
So you said something interesting, Derek. I want to throw it at these other guys to see what they think. Well, you implied it in that if Rivera has a really good season, they could decide to go forward with him. I'm not sure that that's what you were saying, but I think that's kind of conventional wisdom, is that he's playing for his job. I'm not sure I believe that. I'm not sure Ron Rivera, he's a great guy, but I'm not sure he can save his job, because I think most owners, when they come in, owners, they want their own guy. You know what I'm saying? I'd be shocked if Ron Rivera is still the head coach in 2024. Am I off on that?
I don't think you're off in saying that, John. When Ron Rivera came aboard, considering where we were as a franchise and how terrible we were in terms of our roster, I always felt that his number one priority was to almost be that bridge person, to be able to reestablish the culture, to be able to get the culture of this organization back in check. And to a certain degree, he's done that. And to a certain degree as well, he's also helped reshape the roster and put the roster in a pretty good position to win. I mean, we need a few more pieces, obviously, to become ultimately the team that we want to be. But in my estimation, I think the guy has done his job. He's been that bridge guy. He can walk away after this year, and as a football coach, probably feel pretty good about the condition in which he has left our roster for someone else to come in, take over, and then be able to take that next leap. So as far as I'm concerned, his work here is done. Anything that he accomplishes this year, to me, is just gravy. I've never seen him as being the guy we're going to win a championship with, but he's going to be the guy that puts the franchise on the road to potentially winning a championship, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, those are good points.
I think Ron's biggest problem at the moment may be that he's wearing two hats. I think the Harris Group is going to want their own GM. I'm not sure how Ron is going to take to being demoted, because that's effectively what we're talking about, right? Right now, pretty much everybody at Redskin Park reports to Ron. I mean, that's the way the hierarchy's set up. Unless you're on the business side and only the business side, you report to Ron. And the minute Josh Harris brings in a consultant who everybody knows is the GM in waiting, Ron. So you guys are all sitting there waiting to see if I come back. I got it. For those of you watching the podcast, my internet connection is crap, so I'm doing this over my phone hotspot tonight because the city cut the fiber optic cable into my house.
There's some solid entertainment value going on, so it's all good, man.
We're getting the entirety of your statement. It's just coming in slow motion.
Like listening to a 76 record. For those who don't know what that is.
Just to clarify, John, no, I don't think that Ron has any ability outside of some miraculous season. I don't think he's the head coach here in 24. Regardless, I was just saying that the timeline, but depending on how this team starts the season, could get accelerated. Because I think once Harris gets in here and his team gets in here, Harris's history has been to, and he did it in Philly, and he did it in New Jersey with both of his teams, is to get a solid, strong, smart general manager in place and build the team up. So I think that when he gets in here and his team gets in here and they're going to walk in and they're just going to look at this format and say, this isn't going to work. And to your point, Paul, you're right. I don't think Rivera was ever believed to be the coach to bring a championship here. He was a stabilizing force, and he did that. He stabilized the franchise. He changed the culture of the locker room. We've gone from being, the laughing stock of the league where nobody wants to go unless you overpay, to what would appear to be a solid foundation of a roster. The core of the roster looks decent. I would there are some places I wish we had a better core, like O-line. But at a minimum, I think you can win with some of these guys. Where how many years did we look at our roster and say 90% of our roster, 90% of our starters would not start on any other team in the league? Whereas now you can quickly rattle off 5 or 6 names of that would either be the number 1 guy or the number 2 guy. So there has been progress, and I think it would be unfair not to point that out. But I don't see how Rivera can. It is he might be coaching for life, but I don't see how he gets another life. I don't see an extension.
And he may not want it. That's the other
Right.
factor. He
He
went through
might.
cancer. I've kind of gotten the vibe, and I know Mark has been on this for a while now, that he just doesn't seem to have that same kind of like insane
Fire.
obsession with, but like football, like the football side of it is his whole life. And part of that may be being stretched too thin, as Bob was talking about, but I think he probably has reached a point where he's like done most of what he wants to do. And he's a smart guy. I know I've heard him make comments about, this may be my last season. He's aware, he's not stupid, just like Jason Wright. Those guys all know the reality of it, that chances are they're going to want to bring in their own guys. So, but I just wanted to address that because I think there are some people that are like, well, if it gets us to the playoffs, I mean, I don't know. I'm not even sure. I mean, I guess if he wins a Super Bowl, there's going to be a lot of pressure to extend him or whatever. But I don't think that's a reasonable expectation. And
equally, if he found his way into the Super Bowl, I could see him saying, "I'm out." Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Forget an extension or keeping him. He might say, "You know what? After everything I've been through to get to this point, I'm done."
Yeah.
I admit and I understand he went through a lot, cancer, and he dealt with the passing of his mother and a lot of the personal side of things. So you wonder how much does he even want to hold on anymore? Does he even want to remain? He might be perfectly content with having been the bridge guy in the transition, and now after this season, he'll gladly accept the buyout and go live at his house on Pebble Beach, on the golf course, and play golf 4 days a week and not have to think about this shit anymore.
it's going to be really interesting to see if we start to hear more, because obviously Ron Rivera and Mayhew and Perney and Jason Wright, even those guys have not been able to speak very freely about Dan Snyder during this whole process. They've done a really good job of kind of just, being professional. I wonder if we're going to hear more stuff come out like 5 minutes after he's no longer the owner. Whether there's going to be a second wave of stories trickling out. And I know if I was one of those guys, I would want, at some level, they have to want to like publicly distance themselves from Snyder, I would think. So I'm kind of looking for that. I don't know I could be wrong. We may not hear a peep from any of them, but I'll be curious to see if that happens. Now that there's no fear of reprisal, I guess.
If I were Ron, I wouldn't be saying a word about it. I may be talking to people, friends a little bit, but I wouldn't say anything to the press.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's his strength. That's his strength. He seems to have poor impulse control on that front, but you're probably right. That probably is a smart thing to do.
So we've kind of we've talked. I think we all are in agreement about the first thing we want to see these guys do for the team. What do you guys? I'm curious. Is there anything that jumps off the page at you that you want to see them do for the fans? I have something in my head, but
I want to see the name change addressed, and I'm not saying they'll either change the name or they won't. And my gut feeling is that they're just not gonna want to go there. Although I think they should, for reasons I've spoken about in the past. But I think they at least need to put it to bed either way. And I hope they do it like as soon as tomorrow or Friday. Tell us, is it on the table or is it not on the table so that we can move forward? And I'm sure they're well aware that probably most fans don't like the Commander's name for a lot of reasons. The way that it was selected, the fact that it's tainted with Dan Snyder memories, and just the fact that it was never on any fan's wish list, but it was shoved down our throat, and then the whole debacle of how they rolled it out. I'll get over it if they come out on Friday and say, we're the Washington Commanders, we're going to go forward as the Commanders. I just want them to put a definitive bow on it, one way or the other.
Yeah, that's a really good point, John. And I'm personally not one who is holding their breath that the name is going to be changed. I obviously would be thrilled if it was, because I absolutely despise it, but that's another story. But as a consolation prize, and I'm a displaced fan, fans who are in the area might be looking for things like, hey, give us a better stadium experience, or things like that, or things that are a bit more relevant to the local community. But for me personally, as a displaced fan, please, for the love of God, change those uniforms so that they embrace, to a certain degree, our heritage and who we once were. When you look at those uniforms, you have absolutely no clue that, hey, we were once the Washington Redskins. And, as a 7-8-year-old kid, when I would get the Redskins on TV in my market, which was not too often here in Canada, when they were on television, I cannot tell you the degree of happiness and the degree of just the thrill that I experienced when I saw those colors, when I saw that logo, when I saw those uniforms, when I saw those 2 stripes down the pants. It was just a thing of beauty for me. And if we can somehow just, at the very, very least, get a uniform that resembles who we once were, I think that would be a decent trade-off. Like, let me know that, hey, I'm still cheering for the Washington Redskins. Because right now, you look at that team, you watch television, we look like we're an expansion franchise, right? And I'm being force-fed to cheer for something that I did not necessarily grow up loving.
Yeah, I think that a lot of fans feel that way.
I guess mine, I was thinking on this because we kind of discussed a couple days ago having this conversation, and it kind of goes to a little bit of what Bob said earlier about fixing up FedEx. Right now there's no mass transit there. There's no real mass transit there. If you've ever made that walk from the metro, it is not pleasant. So there's a lot of things that can be fixed there, but I guess I had an idea of how they could kind of address that, and I was wondering, to simplify things, to help traffic flow, to reduce the cost of the parking passes and everything, offer some sort of bus package. Follow me here. You can buy a bus pass where they'll pick you up at like one of the local, like you could do it at Springfield Mall, you could do one at Arundel Mills Mall, you could do it at a handful of different places where you can go park your car, jump on a bus, and get a ride to the stadium. That way, if you don't want to buy a pass or you want to drive in there, whatever, something to be able to reach out to those people and kind of give back to the fans a little bit and say, hey, we're going to try to simplify the ability to get you into the stadium instead of making it more and more difficult. We were just talking about, we're going to the home opener against the Cardinals this year, and to buy a parking pass right now it's like $70. And we're selling 5,000. We watched the game and there's 5,000 people in the stands. Like let's look for some ways to get more people into the stands as opposed to making it more difficult to get into the stadium. So something, thinking outside the box, that's gonna, say, hey, we actually do want you to be here on Sunday, instead of we want to make money off of you on Sunday. You know what I mean? Something. And it has to take place like as soon as possible. Don't make me promises in the new stadium, which they're gonna have to figure out because it's 5 years away. Find reasons that people want to come back. Yeah, best case. So
Yeah, so I became a Charlotte Football Club MLS fan this year. My brother has season tickets, and they do a better job at a Charlotte MLS soccer game of making it an amazing experience than any game I've ever been to at FedEx Field. And it's just 1,000 little things, whether it's the swag they're handing out. They've already established, they've only been in the MLS 2 seasons. This is their second year. They already have built traditions, new traditions. They have all this iconography around the team. You know, I mean, you feel like you're part of a special group of people when you go to one of their matches. And I don't know, it really, I feel like they need to maybe take a road trip down to a Charlotte Football Club game and see what a really amazing night watching a sporting event looks like and feels like, with half the attendance that you would see at an NFL game and half the money to spend that an NFL franchise has. So I do think you're right that there's probably a lot of little things. No sewage water spilling on fans. That would be, you know, a good starting point. But I do think there's a lot of things, like it shouldn't cost you $20 to buy a beer. I don't care where you are. A beer should not be $20. Even if they take a hit on the stadium revenue for a couple of years, they need to do something to make it a lot more appealing.
Yes. Yes. And John, I love your idea. I think the entirety of the NFL can take a page out of MLS's playbook where the stadium experience is concerned. The stadium experience at a soccer match is very different than it is to a football match. I've been to both. I've never been to Charlotte, obviously, but I've been to FC Dallas games here in Dallas. And I've also been to Redskin games as a kid. And I can tell you, and that was in the heyday. That was when we were really, really good. Gibbs was on the sideline or Jack Pardee. I mean, we were fighting for a division title and a playoff spot every year. And everybody knew it was going to be a good game. And the MLS experience is still better, I think, than the NFL experience in a lot of ways. And I would love to see the team take your idea there. I come out and say, you know, look, we've had a problem with attendance. Oftentimes there's many people for the other team as there are for our. I want to go back and increase the size of the stadium again. I want to be able to bring more of you to the games. And the more people we can bring to the games, the cheaper we can make the games. That's part of the reason it's so expensive. I mean, when you cut a stadium from almost 90,000 seats down to 55 or 60,000 seats, you got to make that money up somewhere. So that's where you get $20 beer from.
Yeah.
Just my thought.
I also think it's not a family environment, and that's an NFL problem.
Yes.
I mean, if I had young kids, I have taken my young kids to NFL games, but I generally regretted it, to be honest with you. I think they could do a lot more towards making it a family environment, you know, however that needs to happen. But what else do we expect from these new guys coming in? Or what do we hope for? Have we missed anything?
I think they need to reconnect with the alumni, and they need to do it quickly. Like, I think they need to. John Riggins has been outspoken beyond words against this team lately. And Brian Mitchell refuses to broadcast his radio show live from the facility because they don't even let him in the building. They make him do it from the parking lot under a pop-up, like a tailgating pop-up tent. So I think they need to establish that link with the actual players that built this franchise up. Charles Mann, if you guys haven't heard it, did an interview, and he was asked about some, how he felt, and he said he feels more welcome in San Francisco, where he spent 2 years and piggybacked into a Super Bowl at the end of his career, than he does coming back to Washington. He said things like he would want, if they wanted to go to the games, they were given permit. They were allowed to buy 2 seats, and 2 seats were like in the lower bowl among the masses. They weren't even like dream seats or whatever, or they could sit in a suite. Well, if they sit in the suite, then they have a bunch of Dan Snyder's buddies walking around, and he felt like he was more doing a marketing trip than he was actually enjoying a football game. But he would go back to San Francisco, and there was a private suite where for only former players and their families, and they had a private entrance, and so if they didn't want to be a part of the masses, they didn't have to, but they could if they wanted to. Little things like just treat that guy is a staple. He's a legend in this franchise. He should be treated with royalty. You know what I mean? That guy should never have to buy a ticket ever to a Washington Redskins Commanders game. But it's just the little stuff like that where no wonder it's hard to fill the stadium on alumni day. No wonder it's hard to you hear the stories about all these guys just not wanting to be a part of this franchise and not wanting to come back here. It's gross, and so I think they need to really get back in those guys, and they really need to treat those guys the way they deserve to be treated, because those are the guys that we all watched coming up. Those are the guys that built the franchise. Chris Cooley doesn't want anything to do with the team anymore, right? If I'm not mistaken, like he doesn't even want to he didn't even want to come to alumni weekend last year, and that guy was a local legend for years and just a fan favorite. So I hope they can reestablish the connection with the alumni and get some of those guys back in there and let them become a part of the community again, because I think it would go a long way.
I think having Magic Johnson as one of the top 3 owners, I just think that's got to help on that front, because he knows, I mean, he's a businessman, but he's been a professional athlete, an icon in his sport. So I feel like that's going to give them an ability to maybe mend some fences and do things that maybe just the regular suits that come in, to run NFL franchises, it might not occur to them that they're going to offend players by doing certain things. Like we've seen that over and over again, right? Players getting offended. I mean, I don't want to bring up the London Fletcher billboard, Ring of Fame debacle, but I think not messing up those opportunities, we might have a better chance with someone like Magic Johnson being part of it. We talked about it when Megan was on a couple of, I guess it's been a month ago, or more. I hope that the new group does something. I hope they do a couple of things. I hope they speak about the Mary Jo White report and their desire that is fully transparent, and that as much as it's possible for all fans to know the details of what that investigation turned up, that it's totally transparent, that new ownership does not like wipe the slate clean. And I think the NFL is hoping that new ownership wipes the slate clean and we'll all just forget about all the bullshit that went on in Ashburn, surrounding, sexual harassment and everything else. But I hope that they not only speak to that, but I hope that they consider even bringing some of those women in so that they can hear it firsthand. And I know we've got experienced people coming in. They've run sports franchises before, but I just think those women deserve. They haven't been heard. They've been threatened, muzzled, harassed by the previous administration. And by the way, that shit has continued to go on right in front of Ron Rivera and Jason Wright and everyone else in the organization. I mean, I know we don't think they're Snyder kind of guys, but they've been there while this has been continued to go on. So I just hope they do something to like validate what got us here and validate and applaud those women for what they've been through for the last 3 or 4 years and having the guts to tenaciously refuse to shut up to get us to a new day or whatever. But I hope there's some kind of effort to acknowledge them instead of just saying, well, that was the past. That was, other people, and we're just going to move forward, because I just don't think that's enough.
I agree completely. That would be that, apparently that was rumored to be one of the hiccups, was Dan trying to get some sort of indemnity against this, and apparently they've worked through it. And I think ultimately working through it was the NFL saying, okay, well, we can make sure that nobody at the league office or any of the other owners sues you, but we can't do jack against something that happens to you after the fact. We have no legal parameter there, or at least I hope that's what they told him, and said, because he doesn't deserve to walk away with this as a winner. And I don't think he is a winner. He lost everything. He failed up. He somehow tripped up the steps for the last 25 years, and he ended up at the top. But I don't think I don't think it's just a soft landing either. I think there's more to come.
That last little threat he made after the reports came out, I think one of them was an ESPN article about the emails, and then also Washington Post had an article. That threat that he made through his attorney, or my understanding of it was coming from Snyder, of like, this isn't a done deal yet kind of language. I just thought that was so laughable. Like we're supposed to believe that Dan Snyder is going to tear up a check for $6 billion
over some
for any reason at this point. I mean, come on.
What were you gonna say, Bob?
I was gonna say, yes, he's failed up in terms of value. But when Dan Snyder took this team over, the one thing he wanted more than anything was to be the next Jerry Jones, to raise a Super Bowl trophy, multiple Super Bowl trophies. He is leaving with the worst record of any NFL owner over the last 25 years, and one of the worst records of any NFL owner in history. We're talking about a guy that's going to have a record comparable to the Fords in Detroit. And he still owes people a lot of money. People, I keep reading, well, Dan Snyder's walking away with $6 billion. Dan Snyder's not walking away with $6 billion. By the time taxes and all of his creditors finish with him, he's going to be lucky to walk away with half of that.
Right.
And he's moving to England, where taxes are a whole lot more.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. That's what I said. He tripped up the stairs, but it's not going to be a soft landing. You know what I mean? He's not making. He's not making out like some sort of business genius. Like, everybody understands that the only reason that he did not end up losing this team 15 years ago because of the financial problems was because this was an NFL franchise, and it's a license to print money. But yeah, he's gonna. And look, I'm not trying to get inside of his bedroom, but he might lose even more of that if Tanya decides she's done with these shenanigans after that check is, the ink's dry on that check. Who knows? You know what I mean? Like, this is some dirty, nasty stuff that people. She's got her own jet. She might just say, "All right, I'm out, buddy. I'm taking half with me," because I was CEO of this team for 18 months while you were hiding on your on our yacht in the Mediterranean, trying to avoid prosecution. You know what I mean? So it's not over yet. I don't think. I hope not. I hope he doesn't just get to hide away. That would be the worst part.
You were talking about the record, Dan Snyder's record. I actually had it in my head to go add up to actually, quantify that with some numbers, but I didn't get to it. But I think that also brings up the last point that I have to make, which is I want to hear this new ownership talk about winning in a real way. Like, I want to talk about where the bar is. The bar for us for 20 years plus has been hovering around 500 on a good year and threatening to make the playoffs once every 5 or 6 years.
And
That's
sneaking
been
up and
the fucking
surprising
horrible
somebody.
bar that we. And so I hope the new ownership says we're going to be in the play. Our goal is to be in the playoffs every. And I know all new owners are going to say that, but I want to see the bar set. Like, it's not
Yeah.
500. It's not we're going to lose the first 5 games every season before the coaching staff gets its head out of its ass and
Yeah.
gets the players playing at a professional level. It's going to be a lot higher than that, or we'll find someone who
Mhm.
can achieve that. I really hope to hear that and to see that, because I'm tired of. I mean, I will accept anything without Dan Snyder being an owner, as Bob or as Paul said earlier. Just not being ashamed to call myself a fan. But winning, we have some talent, and winning is possible. It really is. And I hope we have a lot more of that.
If we look at some of his other ventures in basketball and hockey as well, Josh Harris, that is. I'm not well versed in basketball, but on the hockey front, he's done quite a nice job with the New Jersey Devils. They are positioned with a really solid young roster that should be able to compete in the playoffs for quite some time. And like you said, John, the ultimate goal has to be winning championships, and you need to put your team on that path towards winning championships. And if you look at his hockey operation, at the very least, that to me seems like a team that could potentially be on that path. Within a few years, they made some serious strides this year, that being the New Jersey Devils. And I mean, ultimately you want to win championships. And again, they seem to be a team that is on that path and giving their fan base some positivity in that regard. So I know it's one small example, but it's also a sign of hope, I suppose, for us as fans of the Commanders.
If there is any karma in this universe, we got to have some good karma coming our way, right? I mean, we've had nothing but bad. And I know people joke about this, but I really always felt like with Snyder, we were just doomed. Like the phrase, that's why we can't have nice things. I always felt that with Snyder at the top. Even in the years where we found a way to make the playoffs by winning 7 in a row or we don't go, those kind of seasons, it still felt like a house of cards that was going to come crashing down, and it generally did. And I always felt like it's because of that evil troll at the top of the food chain in that building.
And Bob, you talked about the record earlier, about how Dan Snyder's record could be, is pretty much on par with the Fords, etc. Obviously one of the worst as an owner in history, so to speak. But when you even look at his two, because when you were making this point, I was thinking of it. When you take a look at Snyder's 2 playoff wins, I believe it's been 2 playoff wins that he's had in his time here. One of them was the year that he took over the team and basically did not have his fingerprints on the franchise. The other was with Joe Gibbs. So I mean, I think that's very, very telling. Outside of some very special circumstances, the guy has pretty much put up a donut in the playoff win department.
You're right. I need to knock on some wood before I say this. I feel really good about this season. And maybe it's just the fact that it's going to be a season without Dan Snyder, and I won't care how many wins are in the column. I don't know, but we were talking about we're due some karma, right? This is why we can't have nice things, and now the thing that's keeping us from having nice things is gone, right? But I look at this roster. One of the things Paul said a minute ago was with regard to Josh Harris's hockey thing in New Jersey and how they've got this great young roster. He's got a great young roster already. I may not be the biggest fan of Ron Rivera's coaching for the last couple of years, but Ron Rivera's roster building for the last several years has been nothing short of brilliant compared to anything we've seen in this town in 20 years. And we've got this great young core of players.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Derek.
Well, the sad thing about that is that apparently he's been roster building for 3 years, and we've got this
great young.
But it's taken 3 years. Like not to take anything away from your point, but I think that's part of the struggle with Rivera is we've been roster building for 3 years and we're still not a contender. You know what I mean? Like, which is why I don't think Ron's ever going to be the guy. Let me just put it, and I don't know what,
right.
Sorry if I derailed your point, but when you said that, it kind of flared up at me that it's like, that's why Ron won't survive past 2023 as the head coach, because we've been roster building for 4 off seasons and we're still arguably the 3rd best team in our division and a long shot to maybe get a wild card.
Yeah, no, and that's a fair point. I think in the NFL, unless you have a franchise quarterback, you're always roster building. You're always roster building because the franchise quarterback is everything. And we haven't had one, and Ron's failed to find one. And coaches get let go all the time because they couldn't find a franchise quarterback. Now, here's the thing. If Howell turns out to be a franchise quarterback, Ron found him. And there's no other way to put it. I mean, Ron drafted him. Ron played him in December, regardless of who told him to, or what, regardless of what happened behind closed doors. Ron played him in December against Dallas, and we all saw it. And now Ron's starting him, whether that's Eric Bieniemy going, I'm okay with this, let's do this. That's great. Ron Rivera is the head coach, and just like the president of the United States, the head coach gets way too much credit when things are awesome and gets way too much blame when things are lousy.
Especially when he's also the personnel guy.
You're right. You're absolutely right. But I just look at this season, and if Sam Howell is anything like the kid we saw for that one game in December, and Eric Bieniemy can do anything with this offense like we've seen in Kansas City, we already know we have a defense. Air at Ashburn is going to smell better, be a little more comfortable. The grass is going to be a little softer when guys bounce during practice. Everything is going to be a little brighter and a little better without Dan Snyder there. Assuming Josh Harris is any kind of a human being at all, because Dan isn't. And this team's been laboring under a horrendous black cloud for such a long play. Just that much better because they don't have to fight all week to enjoy where they go and what they do. And, I just feel like this is the confluence of some very hard work by real football men who got their jobs for whatever reason 4 years ago or 3 years ago. Because, we all know Ron was as much a political hire as he was a stabilizing hire for a team that was under tremendous pressure, both in terms of misogyny and to a certain degree racism. He was the coach of color, And he checked off a bunch of boxes that were very important to this franchise, and maybe more importantly to the NFL, because he may not even have been Dan Snyder's pick. And I just feel like this is, I don't want to say destiny, and I'm not saying this team is going to go win a Super Bowl this year, and that this is an episode of Rudy, but it just feels like the fan base needs something, has earned something. The team has earned something, and karma is coming around at just the right moment in the life of maybe this roster.
I could see it. And I'm always optimistic. I'm that guy. I'm that fan. But at the start of the season, but we've been hovering,
and
we've been threatening
we could
playoffs.
see something that surprises all of us.
Yeah, we've been threatening to. I mean, we've been flirting with playoffs with no quarterback play, right? With like the worst quarterback play in the league. So if Hal is anything close to effective, and if Eric Bieniemy is anything close to what the hype around him says he is, with our defense, we could make some noise. I think I don't really understand all the dire predictions of like 5 wins. I've seen that a lot. It's like, what? We won more than that with
with the worst quarterback play in the league. So even if Sam Howell maintains the worst quarterback play in the league, you have to imagine we'll at least be competitive in more than half our games.
Mm-hmm.
And if we lose a handful of those that we're competitive in, we're still shouldn't be that far away from 8 or 9 wins. So I agree with you guys. I don't know that I'm not betting on it, but I also don't. I don't think we should look at this coming season. If we're in week 12, 13, 14, and we're contending for a legitimate contending for a playoff spot, and we look back, I don't think we should look back and be shocked by that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying I guarantee it, but I don't think we should be so surprised by it. Like, they overachieved and doubled their win output. Well, really? Did they? Or was everybody just expecting, looking at the fact that we have Sam Howell as our quarterback and he was drafted in the 5th round, whether or not you believe that that's any, that is a punishment. And then on the top of other things, oh, it's a new system. Okay, well, the old system was not good. So, maybe the new system will be an upgrade. Like, well, I shouldn't say that. The old system wasn't bad. The old system had guys running free. The old offensive coordinator seemed to not be able to put it together on Sunday. So if we can find a guy that can put it together on Sunday, is that an upgrade? And yeah, there's a lot of ifs. There's some question marks, but just because it's a question mark doesn't mean that it's automatically a negative. So some of those question marks can be positives. We can look at the question mark in the tight end room and say, hey, we don't know what's going on, where there's a question mark there. Well, maybe Cole Turner shows up. Maybe the offensive line isn't as, I'm not saying they're going to be elite, but maybe they're not as bad as we're afraid they're going to be. And maybe Bob, it comes back to your point that the guys are just playing more loose. There's a tangible difference at that facility and in that stadium because Dan Snyder is no longer the owner. I like I said, I'm not gonna bet my mortgage on it. I wouldn't bet a paycheck on it, but I also don't think that if we're in December and we're talking about a legitimate team, I don't think we should be looking at it like, oh my God, this is some massive shock either.
Agree with
that. You said you wouldn't bet on it. I won't bet against it either. I won't do either thing.
Right. Yeah. I'm not taking the field. I agree 100%.
So tomorrow is the big day, guys.
It is.
I don't have a drink, but if I did, I would raise one. I want to invite folks before we check out. I want to invite them to come by the board. Again, it's bgobsession.com. Paul, who's our resident, finding a silver lining in a big dark storm cloud kind of a guy. He started a thread about the Snyder era. It's called the Snyder Era Awards. And so we've got some good discussion going on over the course of the Snyder era. Who was the team MVP? Who was Mr. Consistency? Who was the newbie of the year? The Grinder Award, the most exciting player award, the Pick Me Up Award, who gave a player who gave the team the biggest jolt when he was brought into the game, and then the Coach Award. So I thought that was a nice thread because it has been really hard to find anything, any fond memories to look back on during the Snyder era. The pickings are kind of slim on that front, but anyway, I appreciate it, Paul, posting that thread up there, because there have been some really great players, and unfortunately, like we started out saying, that's one of the most unfortunate things about the Snyder era is that it became about Snyder and all the horrific shit that he was engaged in, and not about the players and the games and the football, which is why, I mean, God knows that's the only reason we got emotionally invested in this team to begin with. So hopefully we can get back to that starting tomorrow. I don't know when they're signing the paper, but I need to find out so I can say a little silent prayer of thanks at that time while I'm slaving away at work.
Tomorrow sounds awesome.
Mm-hmm. Well, gentlemen, it's been, look, and I don't know if you guys will agree with me, but one of the major reasons I've stayed dedicated to this team over the last 3-4 years has been this podcast. And this board. We've all known each other since long before BG Obsession became a thing. But it's kind of what's had us all stick together. We've kind of drowned our sorrows together. We've spent the last 25 years sharing our misery, if nothing else, and then our optimism. So I know a lot of us did never believe this day was going to come, and it's kind of crazy that we're this impassioned about the guy whose name is on the door, the biggest door at the facility, because it shouldn't matter this much, but it does. So, it's the end of an era and the beginning of a new era. Hopefully we can get back to the way things were before. For the first 10 or 15 years of Snyder's ownership, there was still a lot of passion and a lot of devotion to this team. And it's dwindled and it's been painful over the last decade. And I really, really hope it's going to feel different tomorrow. I think we're all expecting it, so it's not going to feel totally different, but I don't even think it's fully sunk in yet that this is actually happening. Tell me I'm crazy, tell me I'm wrong if you guys disagree with me, but
No, it's kind of like
just
Lucy
wild.
in the football, Charlie Brown.
I
in
know,
football.
I'm just waiting for the yeah.
We need that
So,
ink to be dry.
so thank you guys. That's all I gotta say is thank you guys for sticking in it with us all, and here's to the next 25 years of hopefully 6 playoff wins instead of 2 or something. I don't know. All right, gentlemen. Cheers. We'll call it a night, and we'll loop back around here next week. Actually, well, I don't know when we're going to get together, but we should soon because starting the 25th, I believe, rookies report. So the football is actually going to start too. So
Yeah, we'll have real football to talk about, at least training camp. We can talk about our training camp crushes.
That's right. That's right. All right, gentlemen.
Night, guys.